pause to think about the needs of our community. May we show wisdom and compassion in all our decisions. First up under presentations, Oktoberfest 50th anniversary celebrations. We have Alfred Lowick and Margot Jones and maybe some more. Look at Uncle Hans as well. How nice. Well, we still have two speakers since I haven't ever heard Uncle Hans speak.
Thank you very much for the special honor as Kitchener-Waterloo Oktoberfest celebrates our 50th anniversary. Special thank you to all of our volunteers, no matter if they started years ago or if they're with us right now, but they share their time and their talents with us in order to bring German heritage back to our community and share those special thoughts, those special food, the polka, all those wonderful German traditions. Also thank you to the founding fathers who had the vision to entice businesses and families to live along the Grand River. Celebrations obviously are underway. They have been for 2 years. We've been getting ready for the celebrations, planning and planning, but we're almost there. We've got a few things that are like this close. We have a special concert that's going to take place at Concordia Club. Where else than the Oktoberfest on the 20th. Entertainment still to be confirmed. It's being like a country night. Country Oktoberfest makes sense, doesn't it? We also have lottery tickets that are coming on sale for a Porsche Boxster. And Mayor Jaworski, I think black on black would look perfect for you. So we're looking forward to getting that underway. As well, there's a commemorative book that's coming out. We've had some for many of the other anniversaries, but this year we've got the 50th anniversary. It goes all the way back right up to current date. And City of Kitchener got a glockenspiel, but what about Waterloo? We have a time teller that's on the corner of William and King, and we currently have drawings to bring it back to life. It will have a similar glockenspiel with bells, so we're looking forward to putting that in place for Waterloo before the end of the year. Thank you to the City of Waterloo for your continued support of the festival, both monetarily and with the storage of our Thanksgiving Day parade floats. We are looking forward to the 50th anniversary as we plan ahead for the next 50th. Thank you.
Thank you. And Alfred, you're not speaking? You're just like Uncle Hans tonight.
I'm another Uncle Hans. Thank you.
Okay, excellent. I'll turn over to Councillor Freeman, please.
Thank you. Kitchener-Waterloo Oktoberfest has been a part of our community since 1969. The festival celebrates German heritage, food, music, and is operated by over 500 volunteers. While its best-known draws are the Fest Hall celebrations and the nationally televised Oktoberfest Thanksgiving Day Parade, the festival has grown to include more than 40 family and cultural events where all are welcome. We're proud to have a number of these great events like the Mayor's Oktoberfest Luncheon and the Great Oktoberfest Barrel Races that take place right here in Uptown Waterloo. KW Oktoberfest isn't just an opportunity for the community to celebrate. The festival attracts visitors from across Canada, the United States, and around the world. With attendance of roughly 700,000, the festival contributes more than $21 million in economic benefit to the local economy each year and is used by numerous not-for-profit organizations for fundraising. On behalf of the City of Waterloo, I would like to congratulate KW Oktoberfest on reaching the impressive milestone of 50 years in our community. We look forward to celebrating with you this October and many years to come. Give me a kite.
Thank you.
What would a trip to City of Waterloo Council on a 50th anniversary be without a special plaque presentation?
Mm-hmm.
Oktoberfest folks. I was kind of hoping there would be a keg tapping.
Oh, maybe later. We shall see. Next up is the Senior of the Year Award presented by the Age Friendly Cities Committee. And I think, are you presenting first? Okay, awesome, thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Members of council, staff, guests, family, and friends of our honoree tonight. My name is Rick Chambers, and I'm a member of the Age-Friendly Waterloo Multi-Agency Committee. That's a new name. It takes a while to get used to that. And it's my great pleasure this evening to commend to you our candidate for Senior of the Year. Before I do that, however, I'd like to recognize members of the Age-Friendly Committee who are here, Arlene Groh and Jennifer Jackson and Marcia Smelly and Ashley. I can't remember his name. And Ashley. We should also mention that in March of this year, the City of Waterloo was recognized by the Province of Ontario with an Age-Friendly Community Recognition Award. The award was the result of an enormous effort put forth by Arlene and Scott Amos, former employee here that many of you might know, Brianna Zur, and with assistance from the Mayor's Office to submit the documentation necessary to qualify and win that award. Congratulations to that team and to the committee. This summer, the committee is working on a few projects thanks to a New Horizons grant, which was received this spring, as well as several committee members are involved in the International Federation on Aging Conference in August in Toronto. But enough of that, let's move on to Senior of the Year. I'd also like to recognize, just before we go on, that we have the Senior of the Year from the City of Kitchener with us tonight, Celine Bell, who got her award on Saturday at the City of Kitchener. In a break from practice in past years, this year the Age-Friendly Committee took on the responsibility of asking for nominations from the community for Senior of the Year. As you know, the Senior of the Year Award is a Province of Ontario program whose criteria include that the nominee must be at least 65 years old and live in the community. Other than that, the province leaves the criteria and selection process up to the individual communities. With a panel of 4 Age-Friendly Committee members, an older adult volunteer, Terry Weldon, and staff member Jay Kuntz, we solicited nominations from the community. Nominations had to include the candidate's contributions to life in the community, the roles that the person fulfilled, his or her commitment to and participation in the organizations, and the ways in which the individual acted as a role model, mentor, and whether overtly or tacitly acted as a community leader. Meeting and exceeding all of those criteria, we would like to congratulate this year's Senior of the Year, Meredith Radlin. Meredith, would you come forward? Now, Meredith, I'm going to ask you to stand here and be embarrassed while Councillor Melissa Durrell talks about some of your achievements.
Don't be embarrassed. Soak it all in. You deserve it. Meredith Radlin is a retired Waterloo Region District School Board elementary school principal who lives in the city of Waterloo in Uptown. She's donated her time to city and regional organizations, institutions, clubs, and groups both during her time as a principal and since her retirement. Meredith worked with the KWYWCA to assist vulnerable women and their families fleeing violence and homelessness. She founded the local Coalition for the Success of African, Caribbean, Canadian Youth. She is a member of the Congress of Black Women of Canada, a national nonprofit organization dedicated to improving the lives of Black women and their families. Recently, Meredith chaired the group's African Caribbean Parents Network and worked with the local school boards to ensure equitable outcomes for African and Caribbean students. She has also organized Black History Month panel presentations, monologues, and skits to help educate the larger community about the contributions of Black people to Canada, North America, and world events. Meredith has served on the executive of the Caribbean Canadian Association of Waterloo Region, an organization that promotes education and the cultural interests of the Caribbean community with an emphasis on youth engagement. In March of this year, Meredith moderated a panel discussion to commemorate United Nations Day for the Elimination of Racial Discrimination. The panel included the region's police chief, a university professor and activist, a school board equity officer, and an Indigenous elder. Even though Meredith seeks little recognition for her volunteer work over the years, she has been recognized with many awards, including the Waterloo Region Outstanding Volunteer Award and the City of Kitchener Salute to Seniors for Community Involvement Award. One member of Park Minister United said that what sets Meredith apart is that she shows up for meetings, choir practice, the AIDS committee lunch, the children's weekday playgroup, and so on, always offering encouragement and leadership. One letter of support for Meredith said, "Inclusiveness is one of Meredith's forward-thinking traits." Whether working with the Focus for Ethnic Women in Waterloo or chairing the board of Park Minister United Church, Meredith believes that modeling a positive, inclusive, and engaging attitude is what will make Waterloo an inclusive and age-friendly city. The City of Waterloo is pleased and honored to name Meredith Radlin the 2018 Senior of the Year. Congratulations.
Meredith, would you like to say a few words?
Well, thank you all for being here this evening, to Mayor and Council for this award. For my friends who have turned up to support me, thank you. For Jassy and Marcia, who did all the paperwork involved in nominating me, thank you. I moved to Waterloo 30 years ago. It's the only place I've ever lived in Canada, and it was welcoming. It's the place I brought my children up, and it's a place where they were able to flourish and to be affirmed. I have found it a pleasure and a privilege to contribute to the community that has been good to me. Thank you.
Just one last thing, I'd like to thank Jay Coons and Jim Bowman for all their help with this award. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Rick, and thanks to the Age Friendly City Committee and Councillor Doyle for those kind words on Meredith and how much she's contributed. And thank you for being a great Waterloo citizen for 30 years. Wish we had more of these awards to give out, but it's a very prestigious award, and congratulations on winning it this year. We have lots more tonight if you wish to stay a bit longer, and maybe you want to stay for one or not. Oh, Rick's sort of leading the way out, I see. I think... okay. You can come back next week, free to attend. Next up on our agenda is going to be the Bicycle Friendly Communities Gold Award presentation. And as people move out, I'd like to invite Phil Hewitson and Justin Jones up to the podium. And you can probably take your time, but we'll just wait for the chamber to clear out.
Good evening, Mayor Jaworski and members of council. I'm pleased to introduce Justin Jones from the Share the Road Cycling Coalition. And Justin is, I won't take much away from him, but he really enjoys getting out on his bike, and he sees the bike as a way to connect cities, connect people, connect neighborhoods, and to make our city communities more livable and more bikeable. Justin Jones.
Thanks, Phil. Mr. Mayor, members of council, thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. I get to be the one presenting the plaque, which is kind of fun, you know, a bit of a reversal for you guys. So I am here to present officially, on behalf of the Share the Road Cycling Coalition, a Gold Bicycle Friendly Community Award to the City of Waterloo. I'm going to tell you a little bit about the Share the Road Cycling Coalition and the Bike Friendly Communities program before I get to that. So I'll just get right to it. So the Share the Road Cycling Coalition, we are an Ontario-based nonprofit, and we work towards our vision of creating an Ontario that is the most bicycle-friendly jurisdiction in all of North America. We do this by focusing on our three main pillars of change, which is advocacy, building capacity, and changing the conversation. Our entire goal is really to leverage the choice that residents have in how they get around their communities to create communities that are more sustainable, that are better connected, and that are more prosperous. I want to quickly go through some of the polling that we commissioned in 2018. The reason that I want to highlight this today is that the City of Waterloo was a contributing member of the collection of this polling data. This is provincial-wide polling. It was collected by Nanos, and it was an online and telephone survey of 1,000 Ontario residents. It is statistically relevant, and it was done in such a way that it was representative both geographically and demographically of the province of Ontario. You can find it on our website, sharetheroad.ca, under opinion poll data. And I'll just get right into it just in terms of some of the top line information. So the most important one that we found was that from 2014, the last time we commissioned a poll, when we asked residents of Ontario how often they were cycling, 6% of Ontario residents say they're cycling daily or almost daily. That's up 50%. It was 4% in 2014. So the number of people getting on their bikes in Ontario is going up significantly. Now you might look at that and think, well, wait a minute, I just saw StatsCan data and it showed that Ontario's trip to work data was 1.5%. So where's the discrepancy coming from? Well, this question asks all trip purposes. So this is capturing recreational cycling, utilitarian cycling, trips to work, trips to school, anytime someone jumps on their bike. So it's a better representation of the number of people that are actually getting on their bike each and every day. I wanted to highlight a couple of our top line findings from our polling. One of the ones that really jumped out at us was the fact that 32% of Ontarians would like to cycle to or from work. That represents 3.5 million people in this province that would like to be taking their bike to and from work that currently don't feel comfortable. I would say that here in Waterloo that number is probably a little lower. You guys do have some excellent infrastructure, but the untapped demand to reduce congestion and encourage healthier lifestyles is really quite strong. 67% of Ontario residents agree that the provincial government should be investing in cycling infrastructure. Fortunately, we've seen the provincial government respond to this demand with an investment of $93 million through the Ontario Municipal Cycle Commuter Fund. Of course, the City of Waterloo, in partnership with the region of Waterloo, was a recipient of some of those funds, which is pretty fantastic to see. 61% of Ontario residents support investment in cycling education, in a new cycling education program, something akin to swimming lessons, where there's more of a graduated style of learning. And we're really fortunate that the Ontario Ministry of Tourism, Culture and Sport has taken a leadership role in developing new cycling curriculum and a new cycling education program. We hosted a very well-attended workshop at the Ontario Bike Summit in April of this year with over 100 representatives from communities all across the province, including some of your staffers and councillors from right here in Waterloo. And we heard a lot, and we're looking forward to seeing what the ministry rolls out as their final curriculum in the coming few months. Integrating bikes and transit. This is one that's obviously near and dear to the City of Waterloo as you guys move forward with your higher order transit, making it easier for people to integrate bikes as their first and last mile solution to feed into that higher order transit. That is where you really start to see cultural shift happen. And so 70% of Ontarians support making it more convenient to take their bikes on buses. We didn't ask about LRT vehicles because most places don't have LRT. You guys are very fortunate. I mean, you'll be the first to have true LRT in the province, which is pretty amazing. Just a couple of additional points. I'm just going to kind of breeze through these, but just the fact that 74% of Ontarians said that they would like to do more recreational riding if they rode more often. More than half agree that the province should be investing in supporting cycle tourism initiatives. 61% say that if the province is going to spend money on their roads, they should be earmarking a portion to spend that on the needs of cyclists. 63% agree that more people riding bikes is better for everyone, not just those riding, and 84% supporting making it more convenient to walk from home to public transit. One thing I would like to highlight in this that is of significance, anytime we talk to a municipality that has MTO jurisdiction highways running through their community, one of the things that came out in the Cycle On Action Plan 2.0 that was released in April was the fact that when we talk about those investing more in the roads, the 61% agreeing that it should that the province should be earmarking a portion. Well, the province has listened, and they've agreed that any project that lies on the provincial cycling network, which was also released in its final form in April, that touches an MTO piece of infrastructure will have cycling infrastructure added at the province's expense. And so this is a big deal because if you have overpasses going over MTO property, those overpasses belong to MTO, and now they're the ones that are going to be footing the bill for that additional infrastructure to make sure that there is safe passage for cyclists and you're not building new gaps. This is good news. I will move on to the Bike Friendly Communities Program, which is why I'm here to talk to you guys today. The Bike Friendly Communities Program has been operating here in Ontario since 2011. The City of Waterloo was one of the first communities to apply. We hosted our first Ontario Bike Summit here. The City of Waterloo was the first Silver Award winner, and I'm really pleased to let you know that the City of Waterloo is Ontario's first small and mid-sized city to achieve a Gold Bicycle Friendly Community Award. So I want to talk to you a little bit about the Bike Friendly Communities Program and why the city was recognized with this award. So when it comes to a bike-friendly community, it's so much more than just lines on the road and asphalt on the trail. It really is how you think about, how you talk about, how you communicate with your residents about cycling. So while the infrastructure, the engineering side of things is the thing that people think of the most often, the thing that you see all the time, the other 4 E's are the thing that you feel when you're riding around in a community, and you can kind of feel how the culture has changed. So I'm just going to go through some of the highlights of Waterloo's application. So I got some pictures from today. We actually did a lovely ride today. So I'm really pleased to see the Gold Bike Friendly Community signs up already. You guys work really fast. We just gave you those in April, so it's awesome to see those up so quick. Here's our motley crew of people riding. But just to give you a quick overview of some of the pieces that you've seen take place here in Waterloo. So the encouragement piece, things like open streets where people can experience their city at a human scale without experiencing that fear of cars, is a really wonderful program to get people back on their bikes. A whole bunch of partners to support cycling, from your amazing bike shops to the Waterloo Cycling Club to the Cycling into the Future organization. So many different players involved in giving people an opportunity to get back on their bikes, and just so many different events. You guys really do have a very great breadth and depth of programs to encourage people to get back on their bikes. Education, talking to people about how to ride safely. The Cycling into the Future program has really been a game changer in the region of Waterloo, and we're really thrilled to see it supported here in Waterloo region and in the city of Waterloo. Some adult cycling education programs, whether it's Learn to Ride nights with the Waterloo Cycling Club, shop nights to teach bike maintenance, the Recycle Cycles organization at the University of Waterloo. These are all excellent places for people to learn more about cycling, and some great staff initiatives too, like the Cycling in the City newsletter that goes out and informs people about all the amazing things happening in Waterloo when it comes to cycling. One of the things that we love to see is the partnership with our law enforcement friends, and the partnerships that have been forged between the City of Waterloo and the Waterloo Regional Police Service to promote road safety and talk about the Share the Road messaging is something that we constantly reference all over the province. We don't just talk about it here. When we're talking about good relationships between the cycling community and law enforcement, we reference Waterloo constantly. It really is a model for a lot of the communities across the province. Obviously, the engineering, when it comes to the infrastructure that you guys have on the roads, your trails do form an incredible spine of all ages and abilities active transportation infrastructure. They make it comfortable, convenient, and quick to ride your bike around the city. And evaluation and planning. Waterloo was one of the first complete streets policies. It was the first complete streets policy in Ontario. You guys have this amazing protected bike lane pilot coming with the region, some really incredible separated infrastructure that we saw on, we saw so much today, near Lexington, I remember, that's where, but a lot of really great infrastructure. And then some really strong, it's obscured by the pink bar at the bottom, but some really strong work counting bikes and promoting those counts and talking about them. The Congratulations Waterloo 1.3 million trips, putting that out there as a rationale behind why you're making those investments really helps. But the Bike Friendly Communities program is not ever about the destination. It is all about the journey, and there's always another designation higher. Gold is not the top of the podium in this program. There is platinum, there is diamond, and if you get to that, then, well, we'll probably make up a new designation for you to go for, because we want everyone to keep making the roads safer for all road users. And so when we're talking about the next steps for the City of Waterloo to get to become Ontario's first platinum bike-friendly community, and there's nothing I would love more than to see that race really intensify between Waterloo, Toronto, and Ottawa. But just some of the things that you can think about as you move forward with your new transportation master plan is upgrading some of your existing infrastructure to what we call all ages and abilities, AAA infrastructure. That means that it's something that anyone would feel comfortable riding on, someone who's 8 years old to someone who's 80 years old. So a lot of different folks that feel a little more concerned about riding on a traditional bike lane would feel comfortable riding on your trails or maybe on some protected bike lanes. This isn't to say that every road needs a protected bike lane, but it's to say that you need to create a grid so that you can take people from where they live to where they need to go safely and reliably. Establishing a community-wide bike share program. When you look at the platinum bike-friendly communities in North America, the one thing that is consistent is that they have a broad community bike share system. It supports first and last mile solutions to transit, and it provides great transportation options for the residents. Expanding your educational opportunities, including school travel planning at all schools in Waterloo. Every single school should have a school travel plan here in the City of Waterloo so that we're reducing the number of kids being driven to our schools and getting more kids walking and cycling to school. And I was really thrilled to see Waterloo, as part of the Ontario Active School Travel Fund, receive funding to support this initiative. And finally, identifying a path towards Vision Zero. Vision Zero is the principle that no deaths on our roads are acceptable. Death should not be a cost of doing business, of traveling in our communities. And Vision Zero is a leading-edge program taking place across North America where communities are identifying ways to reduce collisions and deaths on their roads. And I think that the great next step for the City of Waterloo, that has provided so much leadership on so many files when it comes to active transportation and road safety, would be to commit to Vision Zero, to do it with a very strong implementation strategy, and to move towards a future where no one dies as a result of trying to get from home to work. So I'm going to close with this. The demand for cycling is very real here in the province of Ontario. 32% are cycling at least monthly in this province, and 54% of Ontarians want to ride their bikes more often. The potential is huge, and Waterloo is on the leading edge of making it real. So I would like to, I'd like to take a moment. I do have the bike-friendly community gold sign that I already presented to you at the Ontario Bike Summit, but I think we should get a photo op with all council members to celebrate this tremendous milestone.
But first we'll do that. First we'll ask for questions around here, then we'll do that. And then
sure,
we'll get
sounds
that.
Great.
We'll end with a high mark. Questions or comments on this from council? I know Council Burke.
You know, I was always that guy who said...
You always are.
I'm always that guy. But who said, okay, all you communists and tree huggers, go ride your bikes, right? Because there's a really traumatic story about me riding a bike years ago. But anyways, but I was always that guy, and I kind of looked at the investments in cycling infrastructure as okay. We're just keeping people like Councillor Freeman happy, but the reality is, a year ago, my wife and I were in Amsterdam, and she became enamored with the bikes that were in Amsterdam and the way the infrastructure worked there. And because it's kind of a rule in my house, you have to wait a year and ask for everything for a year before you can actually get it. And this past April, we went out and we bought her a bike. It's purple and white, and she loves the color. That was the most important thing to her. But she's become a real fanatic about riding it. And all of a sudden, I'm looking at our roads and our trails and our streets in an entirely different way. Not because, well, I do actually like her, but you just look at things differently when you're involved in it in a different way. And that's my generation, right? We grew up, the car was king. And now we look at it in a different way. So, you know what? Thank you for what you're doing. Thank you for dragging old guys like me somewhat into the future. And it's really interesting to see what a difference that can make when one middle-aged woman buys a purple and white bike with 7 speeds and straight handlebars because she doesn't like to lean over. But I think it's awesome. It's great. And as I look at it from a completely different lens today, I think it's really interesting. So thank you.
Thank you.
Next up is Councillor Freeman.
Well, my friend, it's been a lot of years that we've worked together to bring this program to Ontario, and I can't even tell you how excited I am that we made it to gold. I didn't mention it to the mayor, but I did kind of challenge Mayor Watson that we'd be first to platinum. So I'm hopeful that that my colleagues on council will help me take up that banner. There's so much. I'm just so excited about what's happening here. When people stop you in the polling booth and ask you about your bike pin, like happened to me today, and said, I don't know who you are, but if you help build these bike lanes in Waterloo, I want you to know how much I appreciate it. And it's those kinds of conversations, those everyday conversations that we're starting to have as a city with our broader community that is going to make us a healthier community. It's going to reduce impacts to our healthcare system, and it will make us get back onto public spaces with our neighbors and help to build community. And even though we're focusing on that whole aspect of building an active community, and we're looking at giving people options for commuting and so on, we're also getting people out where they take the time to say hello to their neighbors. And we've missed out on that. We've missed out on that every time we get in our car and drive off. So that, to me, is an unintended wonderful consequence of the work that we're doing. And thank you so much for coming here today and helping us celebrate this. And 4 years more, platinum.
Thank you. And I think we're going to make more progress on that even tonight with our bike share pilot. And I happen to see Regional Councillor Jane Mitchell in the audience, and our busiest roads are run by the region. And we started a Vision Zero investigation from the staff about 1.5 years ago now, but maybe about a year ago now. So that's certainly in the plans. And next up, seeing no further commentary, we'll go for a picture. Okay. Next up on our list is a check presentation from Midtown Yoga KW and from David Tivolek. Welcome, David. This sounds like another great thing for us to be hearing about.
Yeah, well, you know, it's always nice to receive money, right? So, and this is an event that took place on, if my memory serves me correctly, I think it was Saturday, July 23rd, 2016, and sort of at the catalyzed by Melissa's, Councillor Durrell's suggestion that there should be a yoga event in Uptown Waterloo. And Melissa had been coming to my studio, which opened in April 2008, pretty much since its opening. And she said, we had spoken casually and informally about doing a class in Uptown Waterloo in the Waterloo Town Square. And finally we did it a year and a half ago, and you can see the picture there. And there was like, I don't know, 45-ish people there. And we had a few local musicians play there. Junaid, who plays flamenco guitar, and Andrew McCanch, trumpet player, and then Jason playing hand drums. So we were fortunate to have a beautiful sunny day, which kind of emulated the hot conditions of my yoga studio. And then people were able to participate in the class for free and then give a donation for the Waterloo, let me get it's kind of a mouthful, the City of Waterloo's Fee Assistant Leisure Access Program. So for participation in City of Waterloo programming, and it's for sports and arts programs for both adults and children. And when I was speaking to Melissa and she connected me with someone at the city, and I was thinking about what should we channel these funds to, and this program was suggested, and it turns out that a staff member at my studio, who's a single mother who has a young son, had used this program to put her son into some programs. So there was a direct connection between the studio and this program. So so we had the event, and it was a beautiful day, and we collected these. Oh yes, I meant to say that I think at that time the construction had begun, so it was a nice diversion from the construction. And we were trying to like put some Zen vibes into the downtown core at that time, so it was a kind of nice contrast with the downtown around, and this yoga class going on with some live music from local musicians. And yes, I have the check here, so this huge check. You might not be able to buy a new soccer field with this check, but it's something.
Wonderful. I'm going to ask see if Councillor Doyle wants to say anything, or is there any questions of the delegate or commentary?
Yes, and I did want to thank Melissa for all her helpfulness, and the city made it really easy to make it happen. There was, all the necessary equipment for, audio projection and so on in Uptown Waterloo, and it happened very easily.
Okay.
Yeah, and I just want to thank David and the studio. You can actually see the construction in the background, and it was a tough time for Uptown, so we needed some good juju, and I think your studio did that for us. So thank you for volunteering to do this and to raise money for a really great cause here.
My pleasure.
Thank you very much. I think we're certainly a prosperous community, but we can inspire people to give through events like this. So thank you very much for taking an activity like this to the community.
Who shall I present the check?
And with that, well, normally it's clerk, but Councillor Durrell and I will come.
I haven't got one of those big things.
No, that's okay. Next up on our we enter staff reports, and we're going to go back to something we skipped this afternoon, the 2018 bike share pilot. And I know Louise is coming back up, but is this just for questions, Louise? There's no presentations.
No presentations.
Questions from council on this? Councillor Freeman, please.
Through Mayor Jaworski, thanks very much for the work on this. I'm going to turn to Councillor Mitchell as well. I'm thankful that the region was a partner in undertaking this RFP, and that we're moving ahead with Drop Bike. And I think down the way, I'd like to move the motion. I'm happy to move the motion. I think there'll be value in trying to get some information out to businesses that are interested to host like a Drop Bike location, because I have a sense that there's probably a lot, and it sounds like the investment in terms of making space for that wouldn't be too significant, because are we providing the bike racks for that?
Through you, Madam Mayor, Councillor Freeman, it would be, Drop Bike will have agreements with each of the individual businesses. So if a business did want to have a station, or a haven, I should say, then they would require to have an agreement with Drop Bike, that particular business.
Okay, and so we'll be able to unpack that for businesses so they know how to participate.
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Next up, Councillor Whaley.
I'm going to second the motion with a comment, thanks to Louise and Phil for your remarkable leadership, but especially to Councillor Freeman, whose love of two wheels has been infectious in this community. And she's got me riding my bike more. She has other people riding her bike more. We acknowledge and we appreciate your leadership. Councillor, well done.
We've already heard of Councillor Burke's story. We won't hear that one again. Anything further on this one? Regionally, we'll be handling this tomorrow as well at Regional Council. So with that, I'll call the vote. All those in favor? It's all of us. Thank you. Oh, Whaley, Councillor Whaley. Thank you, Phil and Louise. Next up.
Mayor, if I could, I'd also like to say thanks to Mrs. Hewitson, who made us all gold bikes.
Wonderful. Thank you. Next up, Neighborhood Action Sports Venues. Karen Anderson is presenting. And I think we have a number of keen people keenly interested in this in the audience today. Hello, Jeremy.
Okay.
Hi, kids.
Okay, I just have a very short presentation on the Neighborhood Action Sport Venues. We opened the Waterloo Skate Park on Father David Bauer Drive in the fall of 2011. At 10,000 square feet, it was designed to serve as our primary central citywide venue. The park is very well used, mostly by skateboarders, but it's also used by BMX bikers, and we have some young people on scooters using the park as well. This year marks the 7th year the city has offered some wildly popular skateboard camps at this facility, and last year we trained 120 young campers on the basics of skateboarding. After the park was opened, we released an action sports strategy that was approved by council, and it set the vision and the actions needed to create a city-wide network of smaller neighborhood venues for these urban action sports that would recognize skateboarding, ramp and jump style biking on hard surfaces, and also looking at some dirt surfaces as well. And that's led us to today's report, where I'm requesting council's approval to move forward with this first set of neighborhood action sport venues. So criteria for success for the design and the location of the neighborhood venues. We've learned a lot from the Uptown Skate Park. These sports are unstructured, they're drop-in style, there are no bookings for these, you just show up, you practice, you learn, and you teach others. Action sport enthusiasts very much enjoy having spectators, we've learned. We like a busy street frontage. Those are the ideal locations where the park is approachable and it can be seen from the street. Our uptown location has been relatively very graffiti free. We've had a little bit in the past, but compared to other locations, it's been very, very good, and I think that's due to the location selection we made there. We've learned that clustering with other drop-in style activities is also a very smart way to plan these facilities. The neighborhood action sport venues are intended to be easily accessed from neighborhoods with high concentrations of youth, and primarily cater to beginners to intermediates. They're not designed only for youth, they're designed for everyone, but we want the youth to be able to access it from their home. In each will include elements that will help young people advance their skills as well. We want them to keep coming back to the facility, so there will be ways that they can build on their skill level. And we've learned that we want to co-locate with a public facility. That's a key success factor in these. We need to be near washrooms, transit, where a site where we have city staff available to help people, and of course, access to food and water. Okay. So a few months ago, we started a staff planning and design team, and we went ahead and we selected 3 locations that we feel would be the first ones that are best to start with. The John M. Harper Library and Historic Family YMCA, one of them, Albert McCormick Community Center, and Rim Park. The Library YMCA site was already brought to council. I think that might have been 2 years ago that we did that as a site, and it was accepted as a site by council, and in fact, we had some funding approved for it. At Albert McCormick Community Center in Rim Park, we still need to work through a process to determine the exact locations at those sites. We haven't done that. Now, the image that you see up on the screen right now is one of the stakeholder workshops that we did for our first skateboard park. So at this time, we need help from a consulting team that have the expertise and the experience in the planning and designing of this type of facility. And we'll also be linking this good work with the neighborhood strategy that you've received and the work already underway on the park strategy. So the 3 pieces will all link together. Okay, so the next couple of slides are just giving some images of some optional types of facilities because these are smaller than our uptown skate park. So these 2 are a hard surface. One is concrete. The other one has modular pieces. That's hard surface. And then next slide shows a dirt surface, which is, this is not for skateboards. This is for bikes, BMX bikes and mountain bikes. So that concludes my presentation tonight. We'd like to get the project started. We're asking for some reallocation of funding so that we, instead of just doing one location, we want to do all 3. We want to plan them together and have consistency, and the end of this process would give us construction-ready drawings. Then we'll come back to council. We'll be back to council at least a couple of times. First time will be to show you concept drawings. So we'll show you the exact locations, exactly what we can build, and the order of magnitude for funding and how we'll fund this. And then we'll be back again for approval for construction at the point when we have the construction-ready drawings. So I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have about this tonight.
Wonderful. Thank you, Karen. First up, Councillor Burke, Councillor Freeman, Councillor Veith.
So I wander by the one on Father David Bauer Drive on a fairly regular basis with my dog, and it is really well used. And they were having a very fascinating conversation yesterday about why the park was good and why it wasn't good, which I thought was really cool to hear from a bunch of 14, 15-year-olds. But my question is this, because when I look at the pictures we put up in this presentation, I look at Father David Bauer Drive, what I see is 97% young male. So is there a way, is there some research out there that suggests there's a way we can create this that is more welcoming to young females? Because I know that's a growing part of extreme sports. Look at the X Games. The female side is growing. But this just seems to me to be a very male-dominated sport, and I guess that's kind of natural in some ways. But is there something we can do to change that a little bit?
I'm going to take that one as a takeaway because I had the same thought myself. We have seen some females at the Uptown Skate Park, but the picture we showed of that workshop was all, I think it was all male in that room at that time. We might have had 1 female. So absolutely, this is something that we want to make it more inclusive.
Great suggestion. Thank you, Councillor Burke. Councillor Freeman and Councillor Veith.
Through you, Mayor Jaworski. I really like the idea of bringing in that element of a dirt surface, because every time I drive by the one on the Queen Elizabeth Way in Toronto, between the Lakeshore and the QE, it's just full of people. And I like it also from the perspective of there's a lot of people who want to learn more about considering mountain biking as an option for themselves, and some of the trail opportunities are pretty daunting to check that out. So that could be an opportunity too, to start encouraging people to ride mountain bikes and ride trails and that kind of thing. And I know that in and around my neighborhood, there was a young fellow that had sent me an email about 5 years ago asking whether we would consider building a sport park, a action sports venue at Rim Park for skateboards. And in the last election, one of the candidates that ran against me really wanted to see a dirt bike or BMX installation. So I kind of feel like there's a real opportunity here to address some of those encouraging thoughts. So, and I was hopeful that for the next report, can you please prepare examples of locations and so on far enough in advance and in such a format that it can be posted on places like neighborhood Facebook sites, so that people don't have to download a PDF, that they can maybe go to an HTML link or something to see that? Because I know in my neighborhood there's a lot of really interested parents that would really like to encourage their children to look at these drawings and participate in some kind of public process around this.
All right.
Thank you. Next up, Councillor Veith.
Through you, Mayor Jaworski, thank you, Karen, for coming this evening. A couple questions, and then I have some comments at the end. So is this, like, if the neighborhood wants, say, a small skateboard park and some other amenity or other kind of things in the hood, is that part of this, or does that kind of go into the parks and the neighborhood strategy?
Through you, Mayor Jaworski. Yes, we want to, we're using a qualifications-based procurement process, and part of that is that there's such a complicated scope to this, and we want to tie in the park strategy, which is underway right now as well. So the answer is absolutely yes, that is definitely our goal, that we can do site planning at the locations so that we're planning ahead for everything. It's not just one piece. Okay. And when will, because I know a lot of people in my neighborhood are really interested in participating in feedback and giving their ideas and what they want, because I know there's lots of that. There's lots of needs and different things that people want, because there's nothing. Albert McCormick area is, I mean, we've got lots of youth and not really much to do. So how will the public engagement bit work for this? When we hire our consultant team, that's going to be a piece they need a lot of strength in. Because we'll be working through the summer. We want to have early engagement in the summer. We'll do more engagement in the fall, and we'll continue it. We want to set up social media venues, but also reach right out to the groups. These type of sports, because they are non-programmed, it is challenging to get the stakeholders in a room. So I'm thinking you won't have trouble with this group. And so anyway, thank you.
Okay, next up, I don't see any further comments. If I see anything I should know there.
Well, I'd like to move the motion, and I have some comments.
Okay, and Councillor Freeman would like to second it. Okay.
Okay, all right. Well, thank you. This has been on the docket. It's one of those reports that have been sitting for a long time. And I want to recognize some of the people that came to hear this tonight. Jane Mitchell, again, our regional councillor, and Lori is here. She's a Waterloo Award recipient and Queen of the Neighborhood. And we have Jeremy Horn, who's here, who is with Life Change Adventures, and he brought some youth with him. We have the chair of the Neighborhood Association and some youth and a friend that she brought with her. So there is a real interest in this project for the Albert McCormick Community Center and the neighborhood. I'm really happy that this is going to be working in with the neighborhood strategy and with forestry and parks. I'm still trying to get a bench in Lakeshore. So anyway, yeah, so, and I believe the Albert McCormick area fulfills all the criteria listed on your your screen there. So I'm really excited, and I know the neighborhood's really excited for this to happen. So thank you. And thank you all for coming, neighbors.
Wonderful. I think that's it. It's been moved. I'll call the vote. All those in favor? Seeing none opposed, it's unanimous. And thank you very much for the citizens for coming out, especially the youth. It's always good to see younger folk in here being interested in what's going on in municipal politics. So, hey guys, good to see you. Good to see you back there too. Wonderful. Thank you very much. We now enter our informal public meetings. This, you have to come back so I can read this out. Brian left first. This is an informal public meeting to consider item 12A, zone change application Z1808 for 651 Colby Drive, Rise Commercial Developments. There will be no decisions made tonight. Council and the public are seeing this application for the first time. Council is looking for feedback from interested parties with respect to this application. Tonight's comments will be taken into consideration in developing a staff position on this application. A staff report will be considered by council during a formal public meeting at a later date. All property owners within 120 meters of the subject lands and anyone who signs the registry will receive notice of the formal public meeting. Anybody who wants further notice of this application, including the formal public meeting and passage of any bylaw, should sign the appropriate registry located on the desk at the rear of council chambers. There's more than one tonight, so please make sure you're signing the right one. The planner, John Voss, will now provide a brief overview of the application. Welcome.
Good evening, Mayor Jaworski, councillors and members of the public. As noted, this is the informal public meeting for a zoning bylaw amendment at 651 Colby Drive. The subject property is located between King Street North and Colby Drive and on the south side of Wyman Road. It is currently developed with a 2-story office building and surface parking with an access from Wyman. West and north of the property are industrial businesses. To the south is a funeral home. To the east are commercial businesses including a beer store, Staples, and restaurants. The applicant is proposing to convert the existing office building, which is seen on the left side of this image, to a medical clinic and pharmaceutical dispensary. 2 new buildings are proposed along Colby Drive and Wyman Road for a variety of commercial uses. The applicant will discuss more details of this plan in greater detail. The official plan designates the property as corridor commercial, which permits a range of auto-oriented commercial uses. The property is also within a major corridor, and development is permitted up to a height of 81 meters, or approximately 25 stories. The site is within the Conestoga Station area, within close proximity to the Ion LRT station at Conestoga Mall. As a side note and of relevance to this application is an official plan amendment which was put forward by the city, official plan amendment number 22. The city initiated this amendment application in relation to the comprehensive zoning bylaw review project. An informal public meeting for OPA 22 was held on May 7th, 2018. The amendments include new definitions for a medical clinic and pharmaceutical dispensary and a specific provision area, which includes this property, to permit certain convenience retail and personal service uses to serve the day-to-day needs of the surrounding employment lands. The zoning on the property is currently I6 or Industrial 6, which permits a range of light industrial uses with a maximum height of 6 stories. The applicant is proposing to change the zoning to C325, Commercial 3, with a height of 25 stories. This is in accordance with the official plan designation and the zoning on adjacent properties south and east of the property. In addition, the applicant is requesting the following things: to add offices of a health practitioner and pharmaceutical dispensary as permitted uses, to create a site-specific definition of a pharmaceutical dispensary to include ancillary teaching and training related to pharmacy and ancillary convenience retail, and thirdly, to reduce the required parking rate from 4 spaces per 100 square meters of building floor area to 3.5 spaces per 100 square meters of building floor area. Several plans and reports have been submitted with the application. Copies of these documents are available on the city's website. Moving forward, staff will review the following and prepare a report to be presented at a formal public meeting, which will be scheduled in the coming months. I'm available to answer any questions council may have on this application.
Questions from council? Councilor Freeman.
Through Mayor Jaworski, I just had a question with regard to bike parking and how that, I know it's a site plan issue, but at the same time, because of the density of both commercial and other convenience commercial, like the medical facilities and so on, it's just in such close proximity to the transit station that it would be really great to see some very prominent sheltered bike parking would be preferred. But I think we should be starting to think about that on destinations of this sort.
Through you, Mayor, we'll consider that through the site planning of the application.
Further questions? Seeing none, thank you very much, John. And we have one delegate who wishes to speak to this, Glenn Shields, GSP Group.
Thanks very much, Mr. Mayor, members of council. Just a short presentation. I think John has covered off a lot of the details. I'm here tonight on behalf of Rise Commercial Developments to just give you an overview of the project. As John indicated, we are in a corridor commercial area, and the application is really fairly straightforward to change the older I-6 zoning to a commercial C3 zoning similar to the other properties in that vicinity. The developer is new to this community, a company by the name of Rise Commercial Developments. Rise has come out of Western Canada and is now moving to the east, and they specialize in doing medical complexes as well as commercial development. The company was founded by Dr. Greg Pelt, and Greg is here tonight as well. If you have any questions about the specifics about the project, beyond the planning aspects, certainly Greg can come up as well and address those. But Rise is very keen to be coming to Waterloo region and to this community. The site, I won't go through what John had covered off, other than to say that this area is certainly, as Councillor Freeman indicated, going through a transformation, I think. Not only are we located here on King, but we're also close to surface transit routes, bus routes, and also the new LRT system is going to be not too far away from this area. And in fact, there'll be 2 stations at Conestoga and Northfield. So there will be a very accessible site and project developed here. This is another view of similar to what John showed. This is the site as it sits today. The former Conestoga Rovers office building, built back in the 1970s. And you can see the 2-story building at the south end of the site in the parking lot. But really the site is underutilized, and it has potential for certainly additional development. There are some mature trees on site, and as we get through to the site plan stage, we're going to try to incorporate a number of those trees, especially the central cluster, in the project as well. And that's just some existing shots of the site. Certainly the building in the top 2 photos will go through a complete renovation, both interior and exterior, to create a new and modern facility. This building dates back to the 1970s and is going to get a complete rehabilitation. So there are 2 pieces to the project. As John showed on the site plan, there's renovations to the existing building and the potential then to create 2 new buildings as well along Colby and along Wyman for additional commercial uses. we're certainly proposing to do a fully landscaped site, and certainly picking up on Councillor Freeman's comment, we'll certainly be looking to ensure that we've got more than adequate bike parking in the area. We're also well located from a bus transit perspective. There is a stop on Wyman in the north end and a stop on King Street as well, so we'll look to tie those into the site so it's easy for people to move through. This is just a preliminary massing model to show you how the site will be laid out, the two-story building at the back and two new one-story structures as shown on the slide. John covered off the planning policy. Again, we're in a commercial area designated for commercial development in the most recent official plan. And you can see on the zoning schedule, it's an I-6 today, whereas the adjacent properties have all been zoned C3 commercial. So that's the zone that we're asking for. And then these are specific uses that will come along as well in the zoning bylaw. And lastly, a reduction in parking, which is consistent with the direction of the city's new comprehensive zoning bylaw. Again, in this location, we have two bus routes and bus stops at the door. We're close to the rapid transit station, and we'll look to certainly provide bike parking facilities as well on site. Supporting studies have all been undertaken, and those are under review now by city staff and the region. And we look forward to moving ahead with this process and the site plan process a little later in 2018 and being in a position to begin construction in the early part of 2019. So those are our comments, and we'd be pleased to answer any questions you may have.
Wonderful. Any questions for Mr. Shields? Seeing none. Thank you very much, Glenn.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else present here tonight who wishes to speak to this application? Seeing.
I guess you can, right, yeah. You
What's
can
that?
take care. Yeah.
Very good. Good with it. Seeing no further requests, this informal public meeting is now concluded. Staff will review the issues and provide further reporting to council at a later date. Next up. This is an informal public meeting to consider item 12B, zoning bylaw amendment application Z1809 for 316 King Street North, Milestone Developments, Inc. There will be no decisions made tonight. Council and the public are seeing this application for the first time. Council is looking for feedback from interested parties with respect to this application. Tonight's comments will be taken into consideration in developing a staff position on this application, and a staff report will be considered by council during a formal public meeting at a future time. All property owners within 120 meters of the subject lands and anyone who signs the registry will receive notice of the formal public meeting. Anybody who wants further notice of this application, including the formal public meeting and passage of any bylaw, should sign the appropriate registry located on the desk at the rear of council chambers. There is more than one registry, so please make sure you sign the appropriate one. The planner, Laura Dewar, will now provide a brief overview of the application. Welcome, Laura.
Good evening, Mayor Jaworski, members of council, and the public here tonight. For this informal public meeting, I'll give a brief overview of zoning bylaw amendment Z1809. So the zoning bylaw amendment application is for the lands at 316 King Street North. They're located on the east side of King Street between Hickory and Columbia Street. After road widenings, it's about 0.26 hectares in size. So the site contains an existing 10-story apartment building and surface parking to the north and south, and I've just identified the property here in red. The building was completed and occupied in 2007, and the lands are surrounded by other residential developments. So high-rise to the west, sort of mid-rise to the east, and there's also a few converted single detached dwellings nearby. So this is a street view perspective of what the owner is proposing to do with the site, which is to renovate the existing building, which is the central building here, by converting the 25 5-bedroom units to 50 2-bedroom units, and also adding a ground floor street-facing commercial unit that doesn't exist today. They would also like to add a one-story parking structure to the south facade of the existing 10-story building, adding a ground floor street-facing commercial unit at the front of that parking deck. Lastly, they'd like to construct a new freestanding 15-story mixed-use building on the vacant portion of the site directly north of the existing 10-story building. And that new building would contain 80 units, all 2 bedrooms, or that's what we know, that's what the proposal is so far, with a ground floor street-facing commercial unit. So overall, the development would contain 130 units, 260 bedrooms, about 2,000 square feet of commercial floor area, and 86 parking spaces. And this is just a rear perspective of the proposed development that the architect has prepared. This is a conceptual site plan of the development that was submitted with the application. You can see this is the footprint of the existing 10-story building, and then there's sort of footprint of the new 15-story building, and the parking deck is in this location. This plan shows the upper parking deck to the southeast of the existing building. It's accessed by a car lift, which is something we haven't seen yet, I don't believe, in Waterloo, in this location here. And this is a below-grade parking plan that shows sort of the underground parking level, and I believe that this level would also be accessed by that car lift. The lands are currently designated in the official plan mixed-use, high-density residential. The maximum height and density contemplated is 750 beds per hectare and 81 meters in height. That existing building was built under the former official plan policy framework. The current zoning is multiple residence 25, which permits 250 units per hectare, 75 meters and 25 stories in height. So again, the two don't quite align. So they're requesting that the MR25 zone continue to apply to the lands with a number of performance regulations being amended to suit this development. And I'll just list them here. So the first is changing the measure of density from units per hectare to bedrooms per hectare, which is very common in these applications. They want to increase the maximum density to 987 bedrooms per hectare through the density bonusing provisions in the official plan. That would be to allow an additional 63 bedrooms above that maximum that the official plan would contemplate. So to do this, they would need to undertake an uplift appraisal that would determine the additional value gained by these additional bedrooms. Staff will be considering the community benefits that are offered in exchange for the additional bedrooms and also the appropriateness of the density increase requested. They're also proposing to introduce a range of ancillary commercial uses, making this a mixed-use development. They're requesting to reduce the residential parking rate from 1 space per unit to 0.66 spaces per unit. They'd like to introduce a commercial parking requirement. Commercial uses aren't permitted today. There's no commercial parking requirement, so they want to introduce a rate of 2 spaces per 100 square meters, but this is really, they also would like those commercial spaces to be shared with the some of the residential spaces. They'd like to reduce the surface parking requirement from 10% to 5.4%, reduce the loading space dimension requirements, and they'd like to allow a parking lift or elevator to be permitted in lieu of a driveway to access the parking, quite a few of the parking spaces. They would like to reduce the landscape open space requirement from 30%, which is required at grade, to 15% at grade, with 5% above grade, I believe in the form of a terrace. And lastly, they'd like to reduce building setbacks. So in the front yard, they'd like to reduce it from 5 to 4 meters in this location here and here. In the southerly side yard, the requirement is 3 meters. They'd like to reduce that for the parking deck to 1 meter. And in the rear yard, which is sort of extending in this location across this portion of the back of the parking deck and across a portion of the back of the new residential mixed-use building from 7.5 meters to 1.5 meters. Sorry, 1.5 here, 3.3 in this location. So the application was circulated to staff and agencies in early May. After tonight's informal, we'll work to prepare a summary of all the comments, provide them to the applicant and their consulting team, work through a number of the issues, including clarifying what the density bonusing package is that's being offered here. And staff will ultimately prepare a staff report and recommendations for council to consider at a future formal public meeting. Thank you.
Does any council have any questions for staff? Please remember this is an informal public meeting and only questions of clarification may be asked at this point. Councillors should not express opinions at this point. Questions of staff. Councillor Durrell first.
Do you want to go first, Councillor Riley? Your hands up first. Okay, thank you. Thank you for the presentation. A couple of questions. The first one is actually more of sort of a big thinking one, which, I mean, that this is one of the like black eyes we have in our planning, the city planning, that area along King Street from University to Columbia. And so how do we make it not feel like a cavern along there? And so this is, I know we're supposed to be talking about this piece in particular. So in your urban planning and your planning experience, how is there enough width on King Street to not make it feel claustrophobic? It looks like they're doing one less meter on King Street.
Mm-hmm. That's a good question through you, Mayor
Setbacks.
Jaworski.
That's what we do in Uptown is we set it back. Are there? I didn't see setbacks or like the. Mm-hmm. What's it called when you do this?
A step back.
Podium.
Yeah, a podium and tower design.
Is that on here? I didn't.
It's. I mean, I think that we have an urban design manual that is intended to guide design and good urban design in the city, but we've learned certain things about this particular part of the city, and we know that it can be very windy and it can have that tunneling effect. So certainly I think we'll be looking very closely at how design can be done a little bit differently to mitigate wind without just sort of repeating some of the classic design approaches that we've used in the past. So we do have to, I think, we've learned a lot from this space, and I think we probably do need to take a slightly different approach to the new buildings on this site.
If I could just follow up with that, I mean, one of the things is they're kind of lined up. And when I look at this, it's exactly where it's starting to happen on the other side now. Are the two buildings almost exactly side by side?
Oh, it's...
yeah. So this is King Street?
I would say there is general alignment. I think we want to balance having a consistent streetscape, which we can achieve by a consistent setback, with making the buildings interesting and attractive to the people that live in the buildings and the people that are walking by them as well. So.
Two more questions, if I could. So this is obviously a very pedestrian area. A lot of people, I mean, there's always someone on the sidewalk walking here. So what is the pedestrian experience then for this proposal?
Well, one thing that's different is the mixed use element. This is something new to this part of King Street. So it should, I think the intent here is to activate the street in a different way that we don't currently see in this area, because right now the zoning doesn't permit commercial along this stretch of King Street, but the official plan framework does contemplate it. So really that's what's new and different here, I think. And that opportunity to activate the street in a different way.
And then finally, I was just in New York City, and they have these car elevators everywhere, and there's massive amounts of cars lined up to get into these elevators. So how does that work? Do you know yet?
I would like to let the applicant's consultant speak a little bit further to the philosophy behind this design, and I think their thinking is that, it's space sufficient, but I don't know enough about the queuing that happens here, and I think they might shed some light on that particular point.
Thank you, Councillor Joel. Councillor Whaley, did you have questions at this time?
Some questions, Mayor. Several, in fact. When this building was built in the early 2000s, the urban design manual was more of a suggestion than a standard. And as Councillor Durrell suggested, this particular building was one that was on the minds of a lot of citizens when they think about some of the mistakes that were made back then, that gave some teeth to the new urban design guideline. In this case, the building itself is 9 stories out of 10 made of stucco. And so when I hear tonight the opportunity to revitalize that building, there's a lot to be hopeful for. The fact that there's going to be mixed use, even though it's, when you're talking about 1 meter separation between a two deck parking garage from the neighbor, I'm not allowed to talk about it being shoehorned in there, but it sure is. But the renovation offers hope for the future, and my question is, because the urban design guidelines, will we see all these renovations reflected in the new urban design guidelines, or will we not? That's question number one.
In the document, the manual that we have today?
Yeah.
I'm not quite sure. I know. I mean, I understand that we're still. Yeah, maybe I'll defer that.
Mr. Cotter has further information.
Through you, Mayor Jaworski, to Councillor Whaley. The proposed redevelopment of the existing building as well as the new buildings are subject to site plan control. So the expectation would be that the new buildings and the retrofits of the existing building would comply with our current urban design manual.
Isn't that wonderful to hear? That's a question. The other question relates to the density bonusing, because when you take a look at the sight lines here and the narrow, the squeezing in of lots of buildings on a small site, it raises the questions of density bonusing. And has there been anything brought forward that you know of, what the applicant's thinking about with respect to what that bonusing will look like in terms of community benefit?
There have been a number of ideas put forward, but I hate to do this, but I would like to have the applicant's consultant explain what it is they may consider bringing forward as a benefit.
Further questions, Councillor Whaley? Okay. I'm going to take a shot at a few and then I'll go to the other councillors. In your presentation, I mentioned the density was requested as like 987 bedrooms per hectare, but I don't know how many hectares it is. How many net new bedrooms is requested?
63.
63. And this would go through the density bonusing process you mentioned in your presentation. That's our new one?
That is correct.
Okay. Parking elevator. How will we assess that? I think of things like Waterloo Fire Rescue and things like that. It's just something we haven't had in our community before. I'm just wondering how we assess it, not just from a planning standpoint, but maybe there's other viewpoints as well.
It's challenging because it's sort of precedent setting. We haven't seen one. I think we have to look at how they function in other communities. Some of the maybe challenges that other municipalities may or may not have with these types of facilities. So learning from others, and I think that you've already mentioned, from an engineering perspective, from a safety perspective, are there things that things we need to think about before we permit this, because permitting this may mean permitting more of them in Waterloo. So,
absolutely. And my next one I think is more appropriate for the applicant. So thank you. Further questions, Councillor Vita Burke? Seeing none, we're good. Thank you very much, Laura. I will now ask any registered delegations to come forward. First up, I have Obi Mujawaz of Milestone Developments, but also have Trevor Hawkins there, and I'll let you guys determine which order you come in. Welcome, Obi.
Mayor Jaworski, members of council, members of the public, thank you for your time on a beautiful Monday. I'm just here to give a quick overview, and I'm going to leave the meat of the discussion for Trevor, my planner. So I'm Obi Mujawaz. I'm managing director and partner in Milestone Developments, Inc. We've done many developments, mainly in Mississauga and Oakville. And when we saw this particular piece of property, we were really interested in it because of the fact that you mentioned, Councillor, it is an eyesore. You're right. It is an eyesore, and it is on the main street and one of the heaviest traffic in the city on King Street. And we're here to improve that. And Councillor, you're also right with your comment about this was a mistake. This building, when it was built, it was the first building with 5 bedrooms, and it was the first to set that precedence of the 5-bedroom units, taking advantage of the unit limitation with no bedroom limitation. And that's why we're here. We're here to correct that. I also want to mention, which is a very important note as well, that the second building that wasn't built, that hasn't been built yet, the 15-story building, was pre-approved as a 40-unit building, 5 bedrooms each, and permits were issued, and it was pre-approved and everything. When we took over the site, we decided not to go ahead with that because we didn't want to further damage the eyesore and that mistake. Actually, what we've done was we've reduced the number of bedrooms by 63 units. Yes, we are asking for an additional 63 from the current new bylaw, but we have reduced the number of units by 63, which is 20% from the proposed and already accepted in the past submission. So the past was 40 times 5 for the new building, which is 200 units, plus the current building, 123 existing bedrooms. That is a total of 323 bedrooms. With our proposed renovation, that reduces the first building, the bedroom count, because we have to cut the 5-bedroom units, make them into 2 bedrooms. We're going to automatically lose a bedroom. And the first building, we will reduce the number of bedrooms by 23. And the second building, we will reduce them by 40. A total of 63 units and 20% reduction of the already approved plans. Also, we've changed the whole layout because the current layout is let's just say that if I had to do it all over again, I would definitely not do it the way it was done. And that's what we're doing right now. We are working on that to make sure that this is no longer an eyesore, to remove this mistake from the city. And my whole team, the planners, the architects, the lawyers, every single person that's involved in this project, the first thing I instruct them is this is a joint venture with the city. And this is the way that our mindset is. Every single step, every single decision we take, we have that in mind. Our mindset is we want to work closely with the city to improve this property and make sure that this is a win-win for everyone, a win-win triple win. Win for the city, win for the community, and win for us. And we want something to be proud of as well once we're done. So I just want to, before I conclude, I just want to stress the fact that and I want to display also that we have been working with the city. It's not just words that I'm saying. Since the pre-consultation meeting, we did take all the planning recommendations from the city, and we put pen to paper, and we've addressed them, and we are continuing to do that. So we're looking forward to working with the city and the community to make sure that we do the best project out there. Thank you for your time.
Wonderful. Thank you, Obi. Questions from council? I see Councillor Whaley up first.
Mr. Majouaz, the citizens of Waterloo are really tired of ugly buildings. And if you can take this most ugly of ducklings of a building and turn it into a swan, as you promise, you will be celebrated for your efforts. Celebrated.
Thank you. I look forward to that.
It could result in a renaissance of other buildings who we went through that 5-bedroom era and it didn't work for us. And if you could come up with a new paradigm for beauty and for utility, this community will be greatly in your debt.
Well, thank you very much, and we are working towards that. And this is not just words I'm saying. This is something that we will actually implement 100%. This is going to be a condominium building. This is a building that we're going to be selling unit per unit. So if we don't take these comments into consideration, this is a lost project. This is not a project that's going to work. So we are taking these comments seriously. We are working really hard to make sure that we do the best product out there so we can sell it as well. We need to sell those units individually. Each one of these units has to be sold to a different person. If it's not something that's appealing, nobody's going to buy it. And we want to make sure that's appealing. And this is going to also improve the community as well. So as it stands, it's a 5-bedroom unit. Nobody's going to be interested in this building at the moment except for students. The way that we are building it is going to cater to anybody. Students, if a father and the parents, a father and a mother want to buy a unit for their kids in school, they can go ahead and do that. If a family wants to buy a unit there, they can do that. This will be a condominium building with that stigma removed. And I think it's actually funny that this building will be the first to be converted from the 5-bedroom, and it was the first to be built, a purpose-built, a 5-bedroom. So it's actually, it has a nice ring to it, I think.
Thank you. Further questions from council? Seeing none. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Next up is Trevor Hawkins. Welcome, Trevor.
Thank you, Mayor Jaworski, members of council. We have a couple of renderings on the image here, but I'll go through those in more detail on subsequent slides. As Ms. Dewar indicated, the property is on King Street, and we can see a number of the buildings that Councillor Whaley and Councillor Durrell were referring to along the King Street corridor as we go all the way up to Columbia Street. And looking south towards Hickory, there are a number of buildings that were built in the 2008 to 2010 to get those buildings in before the urban design guidelines were approved. This building is on the opposite side of the street where there hasn't been nearly as much redevelopment. It is outside of Northdale, whereas those buildings are inside Northdale. But Laura didn't quite capture, there are a number of high-rise buildings on the other side behind this property on Regina Street as well. Some of them are substantial in size, both height and width. This is similar looking south towards University Avenue. We can see the Regina buildings that line up all the way down to University, and then the King Street buildings, and then Sage 2, which has of course since been constructed, and a number of other buildings that are probably not reflected in this image that have been built along Spruce Street as well. Here are some of the images of that stretch of King Street so that council can remind themselves if they needed to as to what it looks like. So here I am standing close to the McDonald's, looking south along King Street, with the buildings on the west side of the street, fairly flat, with minimal articulation in the building facade along King Street. They do have some canopies to let everyone know where they have to enter the building, but in most other ways they're not really exhibiting high levels of design. Here I am standing on Hickory Street looking north, so we can see the south side of the existing 10-story building. So fairly eaves design, stucco design, with punched windows, which we would see if we looked at the other sides of those buildings as well. This is the north side of the building, and I wanted to show this image to give council a sense of what's there today. There is surface parking that surrounds this property at the front, or at the north side, at the rear, and then again in this image at the south side. So effectively you have a building that's surrounded by surface parking with a little bit of perimeter landscaping, which has largely been fenced off around the parking area. Laura did let council know what the designations are. I just wanted to show council the mapping just to get a sense. We have the official plan on the left, so this property mixed-use, high-density residential. So the highest designation. The point of this map is to show council that everything around this property is designated for 81 meters. Some of it's mixed-use, residential, commercial, and some of it, as we get closer to University Avenue or to Columbia Street, is commercial, but they all permit the same height and the same density if you were to build residential. And then on the right-hand side, we have the current zoning, and as you can see, the MR25 zone applies to not only this property, but all the properties as we head north towards the McDonald's on Columbia, but also all the properties behind this that front onto Regina Street. And then across the street, we have the Northdale neighborhood and its unique zoning. So everything around it is planned for and zoned for high density. As Obi indicated, this project actually did go through the site plan process for both buildings. Only one of them ended up being built, but the second building was designed, and it was approved at 325 beds. They ended up building 2 4-bedroom units in the 10-story building, which is why Obi referred to 323. But as you can see, the density was just under the 250, which was allowed in the MR25 zoning, but the resulting bedroom density was over 1,200 bedrooms per hectare. Since that time, council's approved a new official plan. New owner has bought the property and they have a different vision. So part of that vision is to renovate the existing 10-story building and shift away from the 5-bedroom model, which I'm sure council would be supportive of, as well as develop a new 15-story building that's different than the building that was originally proposed, both in terms of what it would look like inside the building, but also what it would look like outside. The commercial space, so the existing, the previously approved project had no commercial space in either building. This project will have commercial space retrofitted into the existing building. It will have commercial space in the new building, and it will have commercial space in the ground floor of the parking structure. There aren't any other buildings along that stretch of Columbia, residential buildings, that have main floor active commercial spaces. In fact, many of those buildings, other than the lobby, have no active spaces whatsoever. So the revised plan, as you renovate the building and as you design a new 15-story building, results in a reduction in bedrooms. So we actually go, even though in the official plan we're asking for density bonusing, in terms of the previous approved plan to what we're presenting to council tonight, we're actually reducing the number of bedrooms. So the 987 does look like a big number when you look at it outside of that perspective, but when you factor in the effort to redesign the building and redesign the previously approved project, perhaps that gives council a little bit different perspective on the reasons why we're asking for the bonusing. Some renderings prepared by Masri O's office, and Rima Masri is here herself if council had any specific questions about the design of the site. It will have a shared parking, so there will be underground parking underneath the entire development. It will also have that above ground parking in the structure, and then there'll be parking underneath that deck. So a combination of uncovered, underground, and covered parking to make the most efficient use of the site as we can. And one of the things that we had to contend with when we were developing this property is the positioning of that 10-story building where it is. You don't have a lot of flexibility in where you can build the second building. There's only room to the north or room to the south, and there's more room to the north than there is to the south, And that was where the building was originally intended to go, and that's where we've decided to position this building. But as council can see from this rendering, it's considerably narrower in terms of it's more of a point tower design. If you compare the look of this building to the width of the buildings I showed in the earlier pictures, which some of those buildings are 50, 60 meters wide, this is 18 meters wide. So it's a third the size of many of those buildings that are on the other side of King Street. And as Obi alluded to, we are making some changes to the design of this building. So we've added a large, it's hard to see, but there's another rendering I'll show later, a large amenity space on the top of this building, indoor amenity space. New facade treatments, Juliet balconies, larger windows, canopy treatments on the main floor, inserting commercial uses. And then we have this large commercial space in front of the parking structure, which will have spill-out space onto the public realm. So a completely different look and feel to this part of King Street than perhaps what we've seen in the past. In terms of the requests, Laura did go through them. I won't go through them exhaustively, but except to say that the setbacks that do relate to the parking deck, that parking deck is about 4 meters out of the ground. So it's not even as tall as a single detached house. So if you look at a 1 meter, it's 1 meter at its closest point, but it spreads to about 1.3 meters, which is a typical single detached setback. So it's not a very tall structure, it's a very short structure, and yes, it does have a reduced setback, but it's not a 25-story building with a 1 meter setback. It's a 1-story structure with a 1 meter setback. If we look at the new building, it meets the setback. It meets the side yard setback on the north side of 3 meters. It's when you combine this, if you combine the two buildings and you measured the setbacks from the two buildings, it would meet the bylaw. But because we have that raised parking structure, we need relief from the combined side yard. Similarly, the rear yard setback, most of it will apply to the parking deck because of the irregular shaped lot in this location. And we do need some relief for the tower, but the tower is articulated at the back, so the rear yard actually increases. It's only at its narrowest point where we need that relief down to 3.3 meters. And then a lot of these setbacks relate directly to the parking, the way we've designed the parking on the site. So this particular property is well served by active transportation and by some fairly elaborate bus rapid transit. 2I express routes that could take you pretty much anywhere in Waterloo region are very accessible from this property, and we felt that a parking rate closer to what the city's proposing in their new bylaw was appropriate for this location. So we're proposing 86 parking spaces for the building, which, if we looked at the previous proposal, were about 20 parking spaces more than the previous site plan approval. So more parking, but fewer bedrooms. We are proposing that the car elevator provide access to the underground and above ground structure. It's an efficient way to design a building. There will be lots of other parking spaces that don't need the elevator, but there will be some that do. So we do need relief because the driveway doesn't lead directly to the parking. That's the reason why that ask is in there. Laura indicated that we were proposing to share the commercial and the residential parking. We're actually sharing the commercial and the visitor parking. The residential parking is 86 spaces separate, and then in addition to those we have 6 parking spaces that would be shared between the commercial and visitors. So visitors who might be visiting people in the building or using the commercial uses. And then in terms of the landscape area, I just wanted to show Council again, even though the project today meets the 30% landscape and complies with the bylaw, it's not the highest quality of landscaping. And to be blunt, there are a number of projects along this stretch that met the bylaw to the T and provided 30% landscape, but they put it all around the perimeter, and it wasn't very useful landscaping. It didn't do anything for the streetscape, and it didn't do anything for the residents of the building. What we're doing here is we're focusing all of the landscape at grade, the outdoor landscaping, at the front of the building where it will be used by people who are visiting the building, people who are living in the building, and people who are coming and going from the commercial uses. So rather than strive for poor landscaping spread throughout the site, we've tried to go for less landscaping, but focusing it in the areas where it would be of most use. Some of the design considerations that we were looking at, so the building does have a fair bit of articulation, so we do actually punch the building out, which is why we were asked for that setback along King Street. So the new tower has portions of it set back and portions of it punched out towards King Street that are closer to the street. It has 2 prominent canopy treatments that actually have pillars that support the canopy, to accentuate the entrance to the building, the commercial units, as well as the entrance to the residential building. And we're going to carry forward those canopy treatments into the renovations to the new building. Similarly, with the commercial space here, we have sort of a stepping of heights as we go across the site to give out, so it's not a blank, large, 60-meter wide building with a flat facade. It's three different structures that serve different functions and give you different things to look at as you're walking along the street. And then with the green and the orange show you the active commercial spaces as well as the active amenity spaces. So there's going to be amenity spaces in both buildings, inside and outside, as well as the commercial spaces to activate all three building frontages. So this rendering actually shows the amenity space that we're proposing to add to the new building. So as you're looking north, as you're coming up King Street, it's a very prominent glassed-in amenity space, which we hope will raise the elevation appearance from that side of the project. So we've submitted all the studies that the city staff have asked for. We understand Ms. Dewar and her team are reviewing them, and we look forward to getting her feedback. Just to wrap it up, I think we just want to reiterate that the project really is a reduction from what it was originally designed in terms of its number of bedrooms. So that's why the bonusing request seems so high. It meets the official plan in terms of its mixed use. It's well below the height that's permitted on this property. We feel that the retrofitting of the existing building could appeal to a broader demographic than today and will hopefully improve this portion of King Street. The activating of the street through the commercial uses, I think, not only will activate the street, but it will provide people who live in the neighborhood with places to go, places when they're walking, somewhere for them to visit, somewhere, a destination that they really don't have along this stretch right now. And we think that the new building is quite a bit more slender than the buildings that council's seen on the other side of the street, and I think that makes a significant difference in terms of its appeal to the pedestrian eye. Thank you, Mayor Jaworski.
And thank you, Mr. Hawkins. Questions? Councillor Whaley first.
Thank you for your presentation, Trevor. Certainly a lot of new innovative ideas being rolled into one development. It's especially intriguing is the elevator for parked cars. Interesting. With respect to the commercial space, we did hear that from the developer that condominium is the way you're thinking about in the building on the whole. But with respect to the commercial space itself, what do you contemplate in terms of use?
Through you, Mayor Jaworski, to Councillor Whaley, we're using the official plan and the tentative RMU zoning. The city has a list of permitted uses in the RMU zone, draft 2 of the bylaw. We look forward to seeing draft 3 next week, of course, too. But that's our general guide in terms of what we would be looking for. We would only ask for what really the city's intending to permit in that zone. So it's a broad range for this type of use. It will allow restaurants, some retailing, as well as some other commercial services. So there's a fair number of good uses that would work quite well in this location.
And then I'll ask my parking garage question. So you must have done some research into other parking garages, or maybe your team has done that before. Could you maybe fill us in a bit on how they might work? And you also said there's actually quite a few parking spaces that are just available on grade and stuff like that. So how many cars will require the elevator part?
Mayor Jaworski, there are a number of spaces under this building that don't require it. So when I come into the site, I come in here, there's a lay-by area here that can accommodate 2 vehicles that are waiting to access the elevator in this location. There's a gated entrance, so there's a light system on the elevator. If it's red, you can't go in, it's closed. That means somebody's coming from the underground or coming from the above ground structure. They then exit, and then the gate goes up, and you can pull in and access the elevator. So it works in a sort of like a railroad crossing. The gate's down, you can't go. The gate goes up, you can. So the idea is that rather than using up half of the property in terms of building ramps, you're making a much more efficient use of the property and wasting less of it on asphalt.
Did I hear you correctly that the elevator only needs to go down?
The elevator goes down to the underground parking, which is underneath most of the site.
Yeah.
The elevator goes up to this deck here, which has about 12 or 15 spaces.
And how many floors of deck are there that has to go up to?
Just that one. Okay. There's a bunch of parking under this building, which doesn't need the elevator, and under this building, which doesn't need the elevator. And these spaces at the back that you can see also do not need the elevator.
Thank you. Seeing none. Thank you, Trevor. And is there anyone here present tonight who wishes to speak to this application? Those were the end of my other ones. Anyone here present tonight who wishes to speak to this application? Seeing none. If there are no more delegations, this informal public meeting is now concluded. Staff will review the issues and provide further reporting to Council at a later date. Thank you. Next up, and we'll just wait for Councillor Freeman to return, although she's probably heard this before. This is an informal public meeting to consider item 12C, zoning bylaw amendment application Z1810 for 29 Dorset Street and 7 Princess Street West, DNA Limited Partnership GP Inc. There will be no decisions made tonight. Council and the public are seeing this application for the first time. Council is looking for feedback from interested parties with respect to this application. Tonight's comments will be taken into consideration in developing a staff position on this application. The staff report will be considered by Council during a formal public meeting at a future time. All property owners within 120 meters of the subject lands and anyone who signs the registry tonight will receive notice of the formal public meeting. Anyone who wants further notice of this application, including the formal public meeting and passage of any bylaw, should sign the appropriate registry located on the desk at the rear of Council chambers. The planner, Frederick Van Rooyen, will now provide an overview of the application. Welcome, Frederick.
Thank you, Mayor Jaworski. Good evening, everyone, members of Council, Mayor Jaworski, members of the public. So this is a formal or informal public meeting for zoning bylaw amendment Z1810 for the properties at 26 and 28 Dorset Street and 7 Princess Street. The subject property is located at the southeast corner of Dorset Street and Princess Street and contains 3 parcels which have been consolidated under the same ownership. The 3 parcels have a total area of 0.17 hectares. So this is a panoramic view of the area looking from the west towards King Street. In terms of the existing property, there are 2 older single detached dwellings that are to be demolished, as well as an existing 5-story mixed-use building at 26 Dorset Street, which currently contains 168 square meters of office space and 11 residential units above. To the north of the subject property is the recently constructed 7-story mixed-use building, as well as the historic Huether Hotel. To the west is the Carnegie Library. To the south is a mix of commercial and residential uses, and to the east are smaller commercial uses moving towards King Street. So this is a street view of the subject property from Dorset Street looking east towards King Street. You can see the existing 7-story building on the left, the single detached dwelling to be demolished in the middle, and the 5-story building on the right. This is the street view from the other direction looking west along Princess Street towards Dorset Street, and you can see the 2 single detached dwellings on the left to be demolished, as well as the 7-story building and the Lion Brewery on the right. So the applicant is proposing to construct a new 11-story mixed-use building, which would be connected to the existing 5-story building on the property. In total, there would be 105 bedrooms and 70 units, 396 square meters of commercial and or office floor area, and 51 parking spaces. With the grading on the property, the parking structure would appear to be 1-story from Princess Street, and there would be parking both underground and at surface. This is a conceptual rendering provided by the applicant's architect, as well as the conceptual site plan provided in the submission, and you'll notice the access for the surface parking is provided from Dorset Street, and the access to the underground parking is provided from Princess Street. With the official plan, the property is designated Uptown Commercial Core and is located within the Urban Growth Center. The lands are contemplated for high-density development, up to 81 meters in height. And the lands are currently zoned Commercial 8 under the zoning, and there are several site-specific bylaws which were passed last year in the Uptown Core area to expand the range of commercial uses as well as permit patios. So to facilitate the proposed development, the applicant is requesting to amend a number of performance standards in the Commercial 8 zone. These would include the measurement of density being changed from units per hectare to bedrooms per hectare, introducing a maximum permitted density of 750 bedrooms per hectare, which would be consistent with the official plan, and reducing the Princess Street line setback, both above and below grade, from 9 meters to 6 meters. They are also requesting the residential parking rate be reduced from 1 space per unit to 0.72 spaces per unit, reducing the commercial parking rate from 2.15 spaces per 100 square meters to no commercial parking requirement, and increasing the maximum floor area ratio from 4.0 to 4.61. The applicant is also requesting that council waive the road widening requirement along the Princess Street for the subject property under section 5.4.7 sub 5 of the official plan. The road widening would be approximately 3 meters, and the official plan contains a number of criteria to evaluate these types of requests. So moving forward, staff and agencies will review the application in detail, including feedback from the public. Staff will follow up with the applicant with any concerns or comments to address. The applicant can now also initiate the site plan process. Staff will ultimately prepare a staff report with recommendations to council, and council will make a decision on the application at a future formal public meeting. Thank you for your time, and happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much, Frederick. Does any council have any questions for staff? Please remember this is an informal public meeting and only questions of clarification may be asked. Council members should not express opinions at this point. Councillor Freeman. Councillor.
Can you help me better understand how council can waive a road widening request if we've taken road widenings from the other landowners?
Through you, Mayor Jaworski. The section of the official plan allows council to, or the city to waive the road widening requirement based on a certain number of criteria. I can walk you through that criteria if you would like. Essentially, the section of the official plan states that the city may modify the extent of the widening to be dedicated where it's not feasible or desirable, as determined by the city, to widen an existing road widening or road allowance to the widths that we've established in the official plan due to significant adverse impacts on the existing land uses, the natural environment, and existing streetscape, a known cultural heritage resource. Those are the sort of things that, the criteria that we would evaluate an exemption or a reduction.
You might not have the answer tonight, but it would be helpful to know for a future meeting whether or not we have taken road widenings otherwise down Princess Street, such that if we didn't take one here, for example, that it would limit our ability to do whatever with that road that we intended to do. So.
Yeah. Through you, Mr. Mayor. I'm not aware of any road widenings that we've taken along the south side of Princess Street. We'll certainly look into that moving forward. I am aware of on the north side of Princess Street where council waived the requirement based on the existing street frontage and the historic property of the Hoother Hotel.
Any further questions, Councillor Freeman? Yeah. Yeah. So, Councillor.
Maybe I
Witt.
could just clarify.
Oh, go ahead.
Frederick is generally correct on the north side. That 7-story mixed-use building, that building just went through site plan approval. So you didn't see it through a zoning bylaw amendment or other type application. At the time, I believe it was a decision of Cameron Rapp to exempt that property from the road widening requirement, partially because it's directly adjacent to a designated heritage property, being the Hoother, and we knew that it's not going anywhere. So, so that was the primary rationale for that decision several years ago.
Good to know. I think that'll be something unique to council. Go ahead.
So it will be helpful to better understand, I guess, what the transportation master plan has in mind for that road, as it relates to this piece of the road widening, recognizing that's what you said about the north side makes sense. There's a heritage building. So it would just be helpful to better understand what the intent of the road widening is and how that relates to our TMP.
Next, Councillor Whaley, then Councillor Reith.
Well, Frederick, thank you for the presentation. It was very well done. It's your first time here that I recall you being at council. I see that you're listing as a zoning committee coordinator. I assume that's part of the planning department now?
That is correct.
Okay, it's a new title, and good job for your first time. With respect to the questions, if you could go back to the rendering drawing.
Oh, my apologies.
There it is. So the applicant is requesting front yard setback relief, and I assume it's because, and I see from the picture now, it's because they're trying to tour up both buildings. That's the reason for that, huh?
Through you, Mayor Jaworski, the applicant is actually not requesting a front yard setback relief. There is a 0-meter front yard setback for the applicable zoning.
And that's to true up both buildings, I understand. That's what I can see from the building.
That is correct. The zoning is applicable to both the existing and the proposed.
I don't recall at the present time the current building having this green space out in front of it. Is that contemplated as a change?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, that would be a change. It would all be addressed through the site plan process.
Thank you.
What's up, Councillor Reith?
Through you, Mayor Jaworski, thank you for your presentation. What's the scoop on those two houses? They don't look very nice right now. I assume nobody's living in them, and they're not on the heritage list or anything like that?
Through you, Mayor Jaworski, the dwellings themselves were constructed prior to any sort of building permit prior to the zoning, so likely before 1950. I believe they were previous lodging houses, but I'm unaware whether they're actually habited at this point in time. And they are not heritage listed or designated.
Further questions from council? Seeing none, thank you very much, Frederick. I'll now ask registered delegations to come forward, and first up is Carol Weeby, MHBC Planning. Welcome, Carol.
Good evening, Mayor Jaworski, members of council. It's council this evening, is it? I'm here this evening on behalf of the applicant, DNA Limited Partnership, and I'm going to try and go through some of the information that staff have already presented fairly quickly, but there are a couple of points I do want to make. So the property is identified in yellow here. You can see it's really on the edge of the uptown core, and it's just on the edge of the established low-density neighborhood to the northwest, and you can see Waterloo Park, Silver Lake, just a little bit to the left on your slide. So it's really a bit of a transition site. It's right on the edge, and if you look at the official plan schedules, it does show the boundary of the urban growth center wrapping around this site. So Dorset does form that defined limit to the edge of the uptown core. And what this slide shows is that it really is positioned beside and in close proximity to the new Princess Lofts, which we heard mentioned in the presentation. Our indication from talking with the architect is that it's actually 8 stories rather than 7, but you know, we can clarify that. So it's an existing building, recently built, and Mr. Boland, the architect for this project, is going to talk about how a lot of the design aspects of that building formed as a bit of an inspiration for the new building to try and complement some of the really excellent design features in that Princess Lofts buildings. And then you can see on the bottom of the screen we have a very old and historic designated building. That's the Carnegie Library, which is on the opposite side of Dorset. And this property actually faces the Carnegie Library site. So it really forms a gateway into this very small, intimate little street, Princess. And I'll speak a little bit about that issue of the road widening in my presentation. So again, this just shows another angle, and that it's really positioned on the edge of the uptown and relates both equally to the new building as well as to the existing historic building. And these two slides, we put those in because of what it does show. Again, we can see on the upper screen the new building. We can see the 2 existing buildings that are on the property, and they are vacant. I can also confirm that they're not listed. They're not identified as either listed. They're certainly not designated, but they're not listed as well in terms of the city's heritage registry. And you can see the existing 5-story building in the background of that side. But what you also see on Dorset, and I'm sure you're all familiar, is that there is angled on-street parking right across from this site. And then if you look at the lower photo, this is a shot of Princess looking west, and you can see the Carnegie building at the end of that street. And you'll see that Princess also has angled or parallel parking on the south side. So there's existing on-street parking both along Princess and along Dorset. And I'm sure we've all used that, and it's well used, and it's very convenient for people that are either shopping in the uptown or popping in to some of the businesses. And it also functions for short-term visitor parking. So you can see that Princess, and maybe I'll talk about this issue about the waiving of the widening, and staff were correct that a decision was made not to acquire the widening on the north side of Princess. And it was done primarily because the Hoother Hotel is a designated heritage building, and it's very unlikely that the road will be widened. You might be surprised to know that on the south side of Princess, where the Waterloo Taxi building is, that building actually, if we peel away all the facade, it's underneath there is a listed heritage building. And again, that building is on the city's registry, and it's built very close to the street line. So there is already an established street line along both the north side of Princess as well as the south side of Princess. And some of the beauty of Princess is that it's got that nice intimate feel. It's a very pedestrian friendly, very intimate space, and we think that there's merit in maintaining that a nice feeling of enclosure. It's a very short stretch of road. It only goes from King to Dorset, so it's unlikely, and we'll check into the question of Councillor Freeman as to what is the transportation master plan, but it's unlikely that that road is going to widen and achieve any significant transportation benefits by widening. It functions well as it currently exists, both with the on-street parking. So we've sought relief for that widening requirement, and that will also relate to the setback for the streetscape. So here's another angle of the building, and you can see from this image that the building was designed, with a well-defined podium, and then it steps back and it really narrows as we get up to the top. And Mr. Bowen will be providing a little bit more discussion in terms of some of the design features to try and create an interesting roof and skyline, and also to try and tie in that existing building and define a really well articulated and active streetscape. As staff indicated, it's proposed at 11 stories. The intent is that the ground floor will be used for for retail, commercial, and that all of the residential units will be above the ground floor. And as I said, will be connected to that existing 5-story building. And we feel that that the architecture that's proposed on this building tries to complement the existing Princess Lofts with the color of the brick, and really try to create a very active streetscape and orientate that building towards that intersection so that we have a nice gateway. If you're standing at the Carnegie site and you're looking towards King, you've got these two complementary buildings with very active at-grade space that will create some activity and a lot of spill out onto the street. So again, it also looks westerly. It looks towards the Carnegie Library, so you've got this nice open space immediately to the west. This is the image that staff presented in their presentation. So you can see that there is this variation in building height between the existing 5-story, the proposed 11, and you can also see how the upper floors, there's a lot more glazing to try and create a lightness, and then the more solid materials down at the base, and certainly the canopy to deal with the wind and the downdraft. But you can see that the width of the pedestrian, I'll say, the small little promenade in front of the building is again intended to create some spillover onto the street and really frame that intersection if you're looking east towards King Street. The chart that you see here outlines the requested amendments, and it's important to note that even though the Princess Street street line setback is there's a reduction from the 9 meters from the center line to the 6, that's really to reflect the existing right-of-way, which is approximately 12 meters versus the designated 18 meters. So we're simply saying keep the road allowance as it currently exists, and then if we measure from the center line, it actually is a 6-meter street line setback. And as Mr. Van Rooyen said, there is no relief being sought from any of the other setbacks. So in terms of the front, the side, the flankage, and the rear, the building complies with all of the existing setback regulations in the current zoning. The density is we're requesting a change from the units per hectare, which is I'll say the traditional measure of density, to the more current form of bedrooms per hectare. And the official plan does identify this site as high density with a density of up to 750. We're just so you note that the actual bedrooms density is 685 per hectare. And we're asking for a slight increase in the floor area ratio. So some of the older zones have a floor area ratio. For this site, it's 4.0. We're asking for a slight increase in 4.61. And that really reflects the fact that we're consolidating these parcels and we're building right adjacent to the existing. So where you would normally have, if you had two separate parcels, you'd have separation between the side yards. This new building is connecting right up to the existing building, and as a result, the floor area ratio is increasing slightly to the 4.61. The reduction in the commercial parking, for the amount of space on the ground floor that's being proposed, it would require 5 parking spaces. So we're asking that no parking be provided for the commercial. And again, it's to reflect the fact that a lot of the people that will be using that retail space are either living within the neighborhood or within walking, or will be utilizing some of the other public parking. So we're simply saying, similar to a lot of the commercial buildings up and down King Street where there is no parking requirement, we're we're asking for the 5 parking spaces for the commercial to be reduced to 0. And then in terms of the residential parking rate, right now the existing zoning requires 1 space per unit, and there's no requirement for visitor. And we're seeking a reduction. It says 0.74, but I think staff was correct. It's 0.72 spaces for the residential. And also worth noting is that the current bylaw requirements don't seek any bicycle parking, and we're proposing 36 bicycle spaces. So again, similar to other applications that I've been in front of council on in terms of the uptown, we're trying to promote alternative modes of transport. We're trying to create a more walkable, bicycle-friendly community. And so we think that the requested reduction in parking is appropriate given the location of this site. I'm going to go through this very quickly, but I think it's important.
You're just about out of time, Carol, so yeah, that'd be good.
I will go very quickly. So, and you can, we can, this is all in our staff report, but I think it's important to note that the application as proposed is consistent with and conforms to both the PPS and the growth plan. It conforms to both the regional official plan and it conforms to the city's own official plan. And I'll skip this. These are policies within your urban design that speak to the importance of a well-articulated building, step backs, interesting roof lines. And again, this illustration shows how it meets the design policies in your own official plan. And in summary, as I said, the proposed zoning amendment is consistent with and conforms with both provincial policy, the region's OP, and the city's official plan. It's appropriate for the property and the surrounding context. It will facilitate a very high quality development that we feel will complement and enhance the neighborhood and represent sound land use planning. That concludes my presentation, and I'm open to any questions that council may have.
Thank you very much, Carol. First up, I see Councillor Freeman and Councillor Durrell.
Through you, Mayor Jaworski. So you've identified 11 stories, but can you help me to understand what the actual finished height is, recognizing that some of those floor-to-floor ratios might be higher than a regular store? Like what
the actual height of the building?
Yeah.
I believe it's 38 meters.
38. And do we know, or do you know, the height of the neighboring structure in meters, not stories?
The adjacent, the 5-story?
No, the one across the street.
No, but we can find that out.
Okay. I'm just trying to better understand what the view sheds are based on actual building heights, because with people liking loft units and so on, the floor-to-floor sometimes is getting bigger and bigger. And yeah, I'd like to see some information in the next staff report on view sheds and that the pedestrian views from the public library and the Carnegie Library and that kind of thing. So with regard to parking, is there any kind of shared parking anticipated where commercial users might share visitor parking like what was noted on some other applications, or is it just straight 0 and people will have to find their own parking elsewhere?
At present, the intent is that the residential parking would be solely used for residents, and that whatever that space may be ultimately used for is that people would either walk, bike, or rely on either on-street parking or public parking elsewhere within the core.
So with regard to the bike parking, is that like an indoor Class A secure bike parking for the residents of the building?
I don't know that answer, but Mr. Boland, who's going to be speaking after me, may be able to answer that.
And because I'd like more information both with regard to visitor bike parking and whether or not that will be sheltered, and also resident bike parking, and whether there's an intention, say, for locker spaces to be large enough to secure, or if there's a separate bike storage room for residents, or whatever that looks like. With the reduction in parking, I need to really better understand how it is that you're looking for transportation demand management strategies for this site.
Councillor Durrell up next.
Thank you, through you, Mayor Jaworski. Hi, Ms. Wiebe. I've got a couple of questions here, but I'd like to start with Princess Street, because I really haven't seen what this looks like from Princess Street, as far as, like, I'm looking at it from the angle from Dorset. Do you have what, I have the dreaded step up onto Princess. Is there elevation there, or is it all street level?
Mr. Boland
Save
may
that
be
one for the
yeah,
architect?
He
Okay.
may be able to have, I
Cool.
left him all the design
That's cool.
slides.
Okay, so then, well, this might not. Would you mind going back to the designed picture?
This one or the other one?
Yeah, well,
That
either
one?
or, I guess. So I guess what I'm. So,
This image does show Princess.
yeah, it's got the step up on it. That's what's concerning to me. And if I was if I'm walking down Princess, so there's a driveway that's being proposed here, or the driveway is on the Dorset side? I'm sorry.
There's actually two driveways.
Okay.
And let me just, it'll be hard to show on here, but I can just get rid of this.
The ones to the right of the old building?
No, I gotta use this.
And then the other one sneaks in back?
So there is an existing driveway right here that
Mhm.
that's there today,
Mhm.
and it runs alongside this building and the 12 DuPont, and there's parking in behind. And then if you go to the very back of the Princess Street side, you can see there's a bit of a grade change. This is actually one full level below what the grade is here. So if you come around here and you go to the very edge of the property beside the Jane
Mhm.
Bond building,
Yep.
it's one full level. There will be a underground parking door that leads to that lower level.
Okay, that's
so they're
what I was
separate.
wondering.
They're not
Okay.
connected.
So then it's really important to me to know, and I know that's site plan and this is zoning, and I get all that, but if I'm walking up a delightful street like Princess and I'm looking at a garage door, that's something I really want to know about.
Yeah, and I think we do have some images. It's also important to note, Councillor Durrell, that this glazing along Dorset wraps all the
Mhm.
way around, almost to the end of that building. So there will be a
Then there's a garage next door to it.
No, it's actually lower.
So you go down into
The
the garage.
sidewalk actually slopes down.
Well, I guess
and
we'll see the
hopefully
drawings then.
We'll have some images.
So this is a one-way street too.
Princess.
Dorset. Is-
Oh, yeah, sorry.
Dorset's a one-way street.
Yes, it is.
So, I guess I'm just trying to figure out if, for the people who are driving down Dorset, there can't come up Albert to get in. They have to take King and around then?
No, and that's not going to change, right? So
I
this
know.
is where the existing driveway is right now.
Yeah.
But the majority of the parking will actually come off of Princess.
The length of the building from the corner at Princess and Dorset all the way to the old building is how many meters?
The question is the length of this
The
building
face of
to
the
here?
building, yes.
I'm going to defer to Mr.
Okay.
Boland for that as well.
Cool, I write that down.
I can tell you that the property in its entirety from here to here is 40 meters.
Okay.
So this is definitely less than 40.
Okay. Okay. I think that's it. I'll wait for the architect. Thank you.
Any further questions? Seeing none. Thank you, Carol.
Thank you.
Next up, Matthew Boland, Edge Architects. Welcome, Matthew.
Good evening. So I've got some questions to answer, it sounds like. Okay. No, we're maxed. It's as high as we go. Okay, good evening, everyone, through you, Mayor. Again, my name is Matt Boland from Edge Architects, project architect on this on this exciting project. I'd like to start out by saying oftentimes in our work that we're doing in private development, we're charged with finding the highest and best use from our clients. And I think this project so far has been great because in all the iterations that we've come up with, design iterations that has led us to this one, there's really been a focus from the client on finding the best, not necessarily the highest. And by that I mean we've looked at various iterations that actually had significantly more density, but what this is all about is trying to really realize the best possible project for this part of town. There's a real vested interest in delivering something that is of the highest quality, that really integrates and complements the existing fabric and creates a great building in the uptown. So with that said, I'm really here again, I think, just to hopefully add some insight into the architecture and urban design of the building itself, to sort of complement what Carol just walked you through. Basically, I'm going to touch on basically three major, I'll call them goals that we have in our design of the architecture. And those goals really are derived directly from the city's urban design guidelines, and so we're going to touch on those just so we have that as our frame of reference. So this proposed new, what we're calling a boutique infill condo building, aims to create its own refined sense of place while also respecting and complementing the surrounding urban fabric and iconic buildings, both new and old, which Carol did show. At 11 stories, this new building will abut the revitalized existing 5-story building on the site. So again, you can even see in some of the existing photos, which I don't have one here, but there actually is a blank face to the 5-story building. It was contemplated for future development like this and a building to be added and the site to be developed out that way. So we're taking advantage of that in this case. It should be noted that we're abutting that 5-story building, and then off both streets we're stepping the building back in various different ways. Carol touched on a few of them. It should also be noted that the relief from 9 meters to 6 from the center line of road measurement, that's what we're looking for, because in this particular case, as it often is in these types of infill developments, parking and the ability to manage and fit cars in and around the site, it takes space, unfortunately. And what the 6 to 9 meter really allows us to do, it gives us some flexibility to play with the massing and the pushing and pulling. We're putting a huge amount of emphasis on realizing a really amazing streetscape, and I'm going to touch on that in the next slide. But it should be noted that relief isn't meant for us to shove the building face and everything right out to that line. What it's really meant is for us to be able to undulate and manage that in a way that is effective and safe for pedestrians as they move around the site. So another thing that when it comes to the stepping back, it should be noted that along Princess in particular, we are, have in particular with canopies and some of that access to parking, we're using that relief to its fullest, but both on the podium and some of the storefront glazing that are pushed back, as well as the upper stories of residential, we're actually closer to 8 and 9 meters as you sort of work your way up the building. So the idea is that we are creating that relief as you go up to create that comfort, both at the streetscape and up in the air for residents. So next slide, a goal in the urban design is creating human activity and social interaction. So here you can see, which I don't think has been shown yet, a view from the corner that really focuses in on that Princess face, albeit at the top end of Princess. I think probably we're wanting to see, what's going on down here, which is definitely something that we've contemplated, we're looking at, and we just haven't got to the point of doing a finalized rendering for it yet. But there's definitely lots of good strategies there on how we're going to work through that, both as part of this process, but obviously as we work our way down through site plan approval. That said, at the street level, our design provides a dramatic transformation from the existing condition, which we can see. Our clearly defined podium creates a safe pedestrian environment for moving around and through the site. We're going to be using patios, canopies, setback of storefront glazing, and this will all promote for social interaction and connection to adjacent life down the small intimate Princess Street, as Carol mentioned, but as well also across to the Parkette, to the library, and the Carnegie building and the park in Silver Lake in the distance as well. So when it comes to facades designed for visual interest, Carol had already shown the diagram on the right of the screen, and our use of design of a defined building base, a range of window sizes, vertical articulation, recessions, projections, horizontal articulation, and variation of the roof line, excuse me, all are going to allow us to, for this building to have its own unique facade, its own visual interest, while again still complementing and enhancing the actual existing urban fabric. And I think some of the reference images we're pulling from are really gonna look to do that and provide a really high quality building. So just to finish off, and then I might touch back on a couple of the questions that I know that are lingering out there. With respect to this design, we still have to refine and resolve numerous items as we continue to work through this process, through SBA, through building permit. That said, we're very excited to see this development come to fruition, and I'm just happy to answer any questions that are going to come. I can speak the width of the building across here is about 17 meters, plus or minus. So there is actually and it's pretty close to square. Actually, there's the same amount of frontage along Princess, and I might just sneak back really quickly because I still have a few minutes. Oh. So just on the street here, again, it's important to note this face, actually for a traffic measure, is pushed back on an angle to create the proper sight lines for vehicles coming around the corner. But it's also a nice way to, again, create that create relief, create that canopy overhang and protection for people to either informally or formally as part of the commercial retail uses occupy that and engage in that space. As you can sort of see over here, we actually are contemplating sort of a raised terrace patio space that could again work off the major retail unit here on the corner, or units, I guess, depending on how they could get demised. And again, the idea is similar actually to the other side of the street where you have the 14 Princess with the Hoother Brewery with a slight, relief between those two buildings where there is a service lay-by. That's the kind of element we want to create here. And we actually have the great example of 14 Princess and the way that, we don't have an image of it here, but the way that they're accessing their parking and the glazed doors that are used. There is actual sensitive, urban-friendly, pedestrian-friendly ways that you can design and realize accesses to parking, and that's something that we want to do. And even in the fact that this is the access to the underground level, but we're still utilizing the Dorset access to get up to a raised, covered level of parking up here. Even just splitting up those two accesses, it might sound inefficient, but in this case, what it actually does is it cuts the traffic in half on both streets. And in a way, it actually allows for better movement and a better relationship, again, around all sides of this building. It sort of breaks it down a little bit. I also, just when it comes to the bike parking, the advantage that we have, and again, we're going to have lots of fun, exciting things to work through with the building department when it comes to the existing building and how we're going to build this new building beside it. But the advantage that we have is there is an opportunity to actually utilize some underused space in the existing building, and in one such case, what our plan is to use both some space that we've set aside in the new underground basement, but also significantly in the existing basement, which is largely unused. That's where we are going to provide the secure bike storage and some of those other things. When it comes to visitor parking or bike parking for bikes, I think that's something that we maybe need to get into a bit more detail on as we work through the site plan approval process. But again, if you can sort of refer to the back of the building here, the residential building does actually come out in a cross the what I'll call the surface parking and creates a large area of covered space for both the vehicular parking, and that would really be the where we're tentatively seeing the ideal place for that type of visitor parking would be off at the back of the building on that raised level. So those are all the sort of questions that I had just noted down, but again, happy to that concludes my presentation, and I'm happy to answer any other questions at this time.
Thank you very much, Matt. I was just looking on Google earlier, and I saw the Edge is located uptown Waterloo.
We're uptown. Yeah, we're an uptown firm. Yeah.
Good news.
We have waterfront property on Laurel Street. So.
Yeah. Excellent. First up is Councillor Freeman.
With regard to the covered bike parking, it would be really great if you give consideration to a prominent location so the bikes can be seen. Like the SEPDED principles of putting bikes underneath a covered parking lot where nobody's there is not so good. So it's a bit concerning on that fact. Even if it was part of like an art installation or something that combines opportunities on the street facing, that would be much better for Class B parking.
Right.
With regard to the existing structure, can you help me to understand how these buildings integrate and whether you're making changes to the existing building? Is there access through the two buildings? Are there windows being taken away on that existing structure? Or use some kind of firewall? Like what is that relationship between those two buildings?
Through you, Mayor, great question. We are going to be considering them as two separate buildings. We may provide, and this is something that we're doing on various projects. In one particular case right now, it's on a new project that's connected, multiple buildings connected by one parking structure, essentially defining them each as their own separate building. From a building code standpoint is sometimes the easiest way to manage and deal with it, and then just create controlled access points as passageways between two buildings with, as you referred to, a firewall. So that is the intent. There is some very minor, I think some very small windows in one grouping of units on that face, and that's something that there is going to be a process of. Currently that building is a rental building, so again, managing with the client. The good thing in this case is that the client actually occupies, or a portion of the client group actually occupies the building, but there will need to be a management of how and where the construction is going to augment or adjust, in I would say a minor way, some of those units. I will say though that there are planned upgrades and revitalization for the existing building as part of this project, and maybe to touch too, I think a question had come up previously about the streetscape in front of that new portion of building. Right now it looks as though there was some old trees that were removed, or not quite sure what's going on in that place, but it's definitely sort of a much more desolate, unplanted streetscape in front of there now, and that's obviously something that we're going to want to work through with our landscape architect through site plan.
Can I trouble you just to go back to the rendering that shows like a bird's eye view from Dorset? Yeah. So can you help me to understand if these amenity spaces on the existing building, if they exist right now, or if that's an upgrade, and then these spaces where you show green amenities, are those shared amenities or are they unitized amenities? Well, how does that work?
Yep. Through you, Mayor. Currently, there is actually a green roof. You could see from, I don't think I have it in my presentation, but there is actually a low-intensive green roof on the existing building. It was one of the features. There is access to it, but I wouldn't really call it a very highly used amenity for that existing building. We do plan to change that, and actually, again, with after working through any related building code issues, we would actually like to have that be a amenity for, call it, both buildings with a shared access agreement structured through the condominium documents. So that will be intended for widespread use by all residents as a proper amenity. The other terraces is what I'm going to call them. I think you're referring to at both the rooftop and then as you work your way down. Those are largely are to be for private use by residents.
Okay. Next, I'll turn to Councillor Doyle.
Thank you very much. I think probably for me, one of the big things about this is we've sort of been a one street uptown. And so what's exciting is to see sort of that retail come onto Dorset and start to create that cluster. But I guess when I look at 400 square feet, I'm wondering what the potential is for there to be more retail along the side in the old building. Is that a possibility, or there's only it can only be put into that new building? So to create like something to draw people down.
Yep. So through you, Mayor. Actually, there's significantly more than 400 square feet of retail. We're talking about the new unit.
Sorry, yeah?
Yeah, the new unit is closer to 3,000 on the corner.
I maybe dropped to zero.
Yeah, well, okay. Or you know what, it's probably, usually with metric, I just add a zero and that gives you your square feet, so that's usually the easy thing to do. Also, there's actually even more. It's closer to actually exceeding 4,000 square feet of the new ground floor, but we're actually contributing, the lobby for the new residential is actually between the two spaces, so kind of to the right side of the new building. Okay. And it's actually quite a sizable lobby, that's going to be again an amenity for the building for the residents, that will look kind of overlook over the park, or the parkette if you want to call it that, but then with the park and the library in the distance. So that's the new ground floor uses. The existing ground floor of the existing building actually is a commercial unit. It's used, I don't know the name of the organization, but there is an organization that uses that space. Again, as we work through the revitalization of the existing building, whether that tenant remains, whether it gets repurposed to something maybe that skews a little bit more retail, I'm not quite sure, but there's definitely lots of, I think, exciting opportunities there.
Okay, and I think all my other questions were asked, so thank you.
Other questions from council? Seeing none, thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else present here tonight who wishes to speak to this application? Seeing none. If there are no more delegations, this informal public meeting is now concluded. Staff will review the issues and provide further reporting to council at a later date. Okay. Next up, we have some correspondence from the region there on page 127. New Business Council. Anything to know from council? No? Nothing to know? Okay. Anybody care to enact some bylaws? We have a handful of them here through J through G. Councillor Freeman? Councillor Veith? All those in favor? That's all of us. Thank you. Motion to adjourn. Councillor Durrell, Councillor Freeman, all those in favor? We are adjourned. Thank you.